On this Friday night, tens of millions of jobs across North America gone. The growing collateral damage from COVID-19.
What's priority right now? Do I pay my mortgage or do I go grocery shopping?
What's needed to rev up the economy? Operation Restoration.
It becomes very difficult for us to say with confidence, don't worry, it's okay to wait.
The expanding backlog of surgeries. The case builds against a Canadian fashion mogul. More women accuse Peter Nygard of sexual abuse. Plus, somber and subdued celebrations. Honoring courage and sacrifice on the 75th anniversary of VE Day.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin tonight with a staggering look at the state of Canada's labour market. The impact of the COVID-19 shutdown has led to some of the worst unemployment numbers in this country's history. Nearly 2 million people lost their jobs in April. That's a record. And that's on top of the more than 1 million people put out of work in March. Canada's jobless rate has soared to 13%. Temporary layoffs account for nearly all of the job losses. Women are still the most affected, but the gender gap narrowed in April. Provinces are slowly reopening their economies, but as Abigail Bimman reports, it will take time to recover.
Sarah Turner is spending more time with her son, Teo. She's one of millions who lost her job due to COVID-19, now getting the Canada Emergency Response Benefit.
It's been fairly seamless, yeah, and hopefully at some point soon I'll be back at work. But in the interim, I'm staying at home.
Turner says it's hard to wrap her head around the statistics. Another 2 million jobs lost in April, millions more having hours or salaries slashed. She's a coffee shop cook, part of the service industry hit first and hit hard. The April numbers show the losses spread to goods-producing sectors, construction, manufacturing.
These numbers are historic. We've not seen anything like this, not in the last Great Recession we had, and not in the Great Depression of the 1930s. Only half of Canadians are now at work.
Professor Miles Korak says consumer confidence and how well we handle the pandemic are big factors in determining how the economy bounces back.
We flipped around entirely from a high-pressure, high-demand, high-work economy to a low-work and stalled economy just in 2 months.
The Prime Minister now promising the wage subsidy will be extended past the original June date. Justin Trudeau says as people slowly head back to work, that will be used more than the emergency response benefit.
To businesses hit by COVID-19, know this. The wage subsidy will continue to be there for you to help you keep your employees on the payroll.
Like many, Turner is anxious to get back on the job.
I guess we'll just wait and see what happens, because the day-to-day interaction with customers was always one of the highlights of my job, so it will definitely be different.
With provinces rolling out gradual reopening plans, so many Canadians are expecting to be back on the job, as different as it may look, in the next few months. But experts say whether they stay there is a different question, and it's a waiting game to find out whether these huge losses are temporary after all. Robin?
Abigail Bimman in Ottawa. In the U.S., today's unemployment numbers are the most grim in history. Over 20 million people lost their jobs in April. That's more than 10 times the previous record set in 1945 after the Second World War ended. As Jennifer Johnson reports, many families are now struggling to get food on the table.
The U.S. Labor Department is reporting staggering job losses in April. 20.5 million Americans forced out of work, the greatest monthly job loss in history, as the COVID-19 pandemic strangles America's economy. And White House officials have no idea when businesses may start to rebound.
I don't want to give anybody a false sense of anything. I mean, I say with great humility and deference, you know, these are heartbreaking numbers.
America's unemployment rate now stands at 14.7%, a level not seen since the Great Depression. Over 33 million people have lost their jobs since the pandemic started. The virus has forced businesses, small and large, to close, some permanently.
I really don't know how I'll get by, how I'll be able to buy groceries.
A concern millions share. A new Brookings Institute study shows nearly 1 in 5 American mothers are reporting their children aren't getting enough to eat.
It's a lot. I'm a single parent. I have a mortgage. I have a car note, so you kind of think like, what's priority right now? Do I pay my mortgage or do I go grocery shopping?
Across the country, food banks are overwhelmed. People forced to wait for several hours to get free food.
We've never seen anything like this.
Congress has not yet taken up a second economic stimulus bill. Lawmakers are divided about passing another massive bailout package.
We've already spent, close to $3 trillion. We've got to understand somebody's going to pay that. Our kids, our grandkids.
Congress has temporarily bailed out the airline industry through the end of September. Airline officials warn if people don't start flying again, tens of thousands will be laid off in October.
We are going to have to make some decisions to reduce the size of our airline and to reduce the cost that we're paying.
Even with most states starting to reopen, Americans are reluctant to leave their homes. The fear of COVID-19 crushing America's confidence and its economy. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
U.S. Vice President Mike Pence's press secretary has tested positive for the new coronavirus. Katie Miller is also the wife to top Trump aide Stephen Miller, though Trump says he hasn't come into contact with her. 6 people who had been in contact with the press secretary were removed from a flight with Pence just before it took off today. Miller is the second person in the White House complex known to test positive this week. Here's the breakdown of cases in Canada. Over 65,000 people have been infected with COVID-19 and more than 4,000 people have died from the virus in this country. Quebec is still the hardest hit, but Ontario recorded a significant spike today, its biggest in 6 days. Cases in that province are up 477 since yesterday, so more than 19,000 people have tested positive in Ontario. Another 63 people died in Ontario in the last 24 hours. With the death toll now at over 1,500. The pandemic has hit the front lines hard. More than 3,000 healthcare workers are infected with COVID-19. That's more than the total number of confirmed cases in BC, Nova Scotia, and Saskatchewan. Doctors, nurses, and other hospital staff right across Canada have put so much on the line by facing this pandemic head-on, and their critical work is paying off. We're now beginning to see plans for provinces to resume elective surgeries, canceled to prepare for COVID-19. But the backlog is huge, and as Heather Yourex-West reports, it's likely to be a long road ahead.
Jerry Weisenfeld has waited 4 years for knee replacement surgery, but days before he was scheduled to go under the knife, he learned his procedure had been canceled.
I guess they have to take care of people who are in far worse shape than I am.
The COVID-19 pandemic meant thousands of elective surgeries had to be put on hold. BC officials counted 30,000 missed procedures in that province alone. With COVID-19 infections now waning, BC's chief medical health officer says the time is right to get BC surgeons operating again.
We can now safely assume that most patients do not have COVID-19, and that allows us to change the protocols and to make them no less safe, but certainly a little more streamlined.
Elective surgeries have restarted or will soon resume in many other provinces across the country as well. But getting through the backlog won't be easy.
Even to get back to the normal capacity in normal times, we're not able to do that yet because we still have staff who are involved in caring for COVID patients. They might be redeployed to long-term care. And we also have these supply chain problems for personal protective equipment, for drugs. There's a lot of moving parts.
Some patients may not be able to safely wait much longer. Over the last 2 months, urgent cancer surgeries have continued. The concern now is that those other cases may have progressed.
The patients who may not have appeared very urgent, who in normal times would have a wait time of about 3 weeks or 4 weeks to have their cancer out, are now into the 6 weeks, 8 weeks wait time, and that's where we lose predictability of the disease.
And so there is little time to waste. Ramp up surgery again, or risk having this pandemic claim even more lives. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
One of the largest poultry plants in Canada is dealing with an outbreak of COVID-19. Tonight, an employee at Maple Lodge Farms is speaking out about the conditions inside the facility. At least 25 workers at the Brampton, Ontario plant have tested positive for COVID-19. One person has died. Global News spoke with an employee today, and we have agreed not to reveal this person's identity for fear of reprisal. The worker says Maple Lodge Farms is not providing enough PPE to keep staff safe.
It's scary, pretty much, because it can happen to anyone now. It in the workplace. They keep the plant open because they want to keep Canadians like food and stuff, but at the same time, the workers are just as important, if not more, because we're the ones who are processing the food for Canadians.
Global News reached out to Maple Lodge Farms for a response. In a statement, the company says Public Health and the Ministry of Labor are the authorities of public and workplace health, and both are satisfied with our preventative plan and the measures we have implemented to keep our employees safe. As Europe starts relaxing restrictions, Russia is emerging as the latest COVID-19 hotspot. Cases and deaths are surging, and the numbers are staggering. For a sixth straight day, Russia confirmed 10,000 people were infected with COVID-19 in just 24 hours, bringing the total number of cases to more than 187,000. Russia is now the fifth most affected country in the world. 1,700 people there have died. The world is watching just how fast COVID-19 is spreading around the globe. There are now more than 4 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 worldwide, and more than 275,000 people have died. Mexico recorded its highest daily toll with more than 1,900 new cases. Brazil, one of the world's emerging coronavirus hotspots, registered more than 5,300 new cases. According to a study by the World Health Organization, up to 190,000 people could die of COVID-19 in Africa in the first year of the pandemic if no containment measures are taken. The UN is sounding the alarm on the rise in hate and xenophobia. The World Body's Secretary General says migrants and refugees have been vilified as a source of COVID-19. Antonio Guterres says the virus does not care who we are and where we live, and he's calling for an all-out effort to end hate speech globally.
The pandemic continues to unleash a tsunami of hate and xenophobia, scapegoating and scaremongering. Anti-foreigner sentiment has surged online and in the streets. Anti-Semitic conspiracy theories have spread, and COVID-19 related anti-Muslim attacks have occurred.
And at least one Canadian city has reported a disturbing increase in hateful incidents. The Vancouver Police Department says 20 anti-Asian hate crimes have been reported to police so far this year. In comparison, there were 12 anti-Asian hate crimes reported in Vancouver all of 2019. And police do note that many people choose not to report. The Alberta government is promising $147 million to help residents rebuild after severe spring flooding. Northern communities like Fort McMurray are mopping up after ice jams caused the Athabasca and Clearwater rivers to overflow. 13,000 people were forced to flee their homes. Premier Jason Kenney says Albertans are tough but need help.
We never have to go it alone in this province. Albertans always come through for each other. And so it is again this year.
The funding is on top of the nearly $8 million in emergency flood payments already provided to evacuees. It's estimated there is $100 million in damage. Nova Scotia's grieving families could get their day in court. Coming up, the class action lawsuit being proposed after last month's rampage. Plus, the multiplying allegations of sexual abuse against a Canadian fashion executive. The number of women accusing Canadian fashion mogul Peter Nygard of rape and sexual assault has grown. Since a class action lawsuit was filed in New York State in February, 46 women have come forward. That list includes 18 Canadians. But as Mike Armstrong explains, there may be more than that.
There were only 10 plaintiffs when the suit against Peter Nygard was launched barely 3 months ago. Since then, 36 more women have stepped forward. The recently amended lawsuit against the fashion mogul is now on behalf of 46 women, referred to at this point only as Jane Doe. The suit accuses Nygaard of rape, sexual assault, sexual battery, and molestation of both young women and children, some as young as 14. None of it has been proven in court, and Nygaard has not been charged in Canada or the U.S. Both are countries where attacks are alleged to have taken place. The plaintiff's lawyer, Lisa Haba, says Nygaard preyed on women he could coerce or entice.
He often used the fact that he runs a fashion business
to lure women with the promise of a modeling career or a job within his company.
The eccentric fashion mogul's case was before a judge again this week. His lawyers were trying to get the identities of the women. The judge will rule on that July 22nd. But the plaintiff's lawyer says handing over the names this early in the process, prior to discovery, could open them up to retribution by Nygaard, and they're fighting it.
We have decided to protect our clients. We want to make sure that their safety is our foremost concern.
Scandalous allegations.
Now, Nygaard's lawyer continues to deny his client did anything wrong. He says the plaintiffs are hoping to cash in. But Global News spoke to another woman Friday, a Montrealer who says she was sexually assaulted by Nygaard when she was a young model starting out. She's considering joining the lawsuit.
Our evidence shows there are far more victims.
I'm in medical business now.
Abba says even though there have been reports about Nygaard's treatment of women going back years, she claims to have evidence it hasn't stopped. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
A proposed class action lawsuit has been filed against the estate of the gunman who killed 22 people in Nova Scotia last month. Court documents show the lawsuit has been filed on behalf of Nicholas Beaton, whose wife Kristen was killed, and families of some of the other victims. The suit is seeking damages for the spouses, children, and/or parents of the victims, along with injuries and damage caused by the gunman. A judge must approve the lawsuit before it can proceed to trial. Still ahead, protesters say the investigation was stalled in the murder of a black man killed while jogging. Two white men in Georgia, a former police officer and his son, have been arrested and charged with murder in the fatal shooting of a black man. Gregory McMichael and his son Travis went before a judge via video conference today. Ahmaud Arbery was shot and killed on February 23rd. Then this week, video was released showing the shooting. It sparked a national outcry and prompted Georgia's governor to launch an investigation. The suspects told police they thought Arbery was a burglary suspect. Arbery's family says he was unarmed and just out for a jog.
His heart was just bigger than life. I tell you, he just loved people. He just was a good young man. And he just was outgoing with everybody.
No justice! No peace!
Today, Arbery would have celebrated his 26th birthday. Instead, protesters, almost all wearing masks, packed in front of the courthouse to demand justice for his death. They believe local authorities stalled the investigation. Turkish prosecutors have laid charges related to the daring escape of Nissan's former boss. 7 people are accused of helping Carlos Ghosn get out of Japan. 4 pilots and an airline official are charged with illegally smuggling a migrant. 2 flight attendants are accused of failing to report a crime. Ghosn, who was arrested over allegations of financial misconduct, skipped bail while awaiting trial in Japan last year. It's believed he was smuggled out of house arrest in an instrument case. He then flew to Istanbul, then on to Beirut. Japan has no extradition treaty with Lebanon. Up next, marking the victories of one war while fighting a different historic battle. That was the sound heard across London today. The Royal Air Force's Red Arrows flew in formation over the city to mark the 75th anniversary of VE Day. On May 8, 1945, Allied forces accepted Nazi Germany's surrender, bringing an end to the Second World War in Europe. Similar flypasts took place across Britain to honor veterans. This anniversary would have been commemorated with a huge celebration, but in the middle of a pandemic, that isn't possible. Millions of people around the world, including Second World War veterans, are isolating at home. But as Eric Sorensen explains, they came up with new ways to mark the historic day.
From nations that were brutally attacked, to those that were occupied, to the country that carries the burden for starting it all, the ceremonies to mark Victory in Europe Day were as different and somber as any in recent memory. Europeans not only stood silently, they stood alone. Victory in Europe led to an era of cooperation and trust for many adversaries, and yet the togetherness that usually marks this day was missing. In Ottawa, too, the War Memorial was a stark backdrop for today's remembrance.
In this month of May 2020, let us celebrate freedom and remain strong in the face of adversity.
Many of the happy thousands who come to welcome peace.
The celebrations we'd come to take for granted, from the first jubilant events when the Second World War ended to the annual Comrades in Arms, shoulder to shoulder, just weren't possible this year.
They died so we could live as free people in a world of free nations. They risked all so our families and neighborhoods could be safe.
They thought I would make a good soldier.
Norm Kirby was just 17 when he became a good soldier. He was to attend the ceremonies in Europe this year, his image on the poster commemorating the event. Still, he spoke recently about the importance of the war he fought and survived in Holland.
We had quite a battle there, and we lost a few guys.
It was a war so devastating and long-lasting that even in today's challenging time, it's hard to imagine what they went through.
To walk beside a guy knowing damn well that if he stepped on the mine, he would tell you, he'd push you out of the way, and he'd let the mine blow him up.
More than 1 million Canadians and Newfoundlanders served in the war. More than 45,000 were killed.
They fought and they died to defend the values that we hold dear: freedom, peace, and equality. And we are forever grateful.
Like many Canadians who liberated Europe, Norm Kirby would never forget the children whose future was changed on this day 75 years ago.
It was worth it to see all of this. So don't ever think that it's a waste of time. It wasn't.
Eric Sorensen, Global News.
And that is Global National for this Friday. I'm Robin Gill. We leave you tonight with 5 notes that carry infinite meaning. Horn players came together while staying apart for the last post. It is played to honor the lost, the fallen, and the dead. Thank you for watching. Good night.